All right, so welcome to the Flying in Returns / Patron stream. So this is going to be what I imagine is a very low energy stream. I've been a little busy, more than a little busy, but I did promise that we would have a stream where we did general Q&A, kind of a look back on the previous year in terms of YouTube content. This is sort of for the benefit of patrons, although no patrons have graced us with their presence yet. So if you are interested, you could always send some precious shekels my way.
Or mine.
Well, I mean, or you could just sit back and watch. Just one order of business. I had sort of like a 24-hour burner Q&A kind of back and forth with my fiance. I'm thinking of spinning that off onto a different channel, but it's kind of not. It's not yet going to be a regular feature on this channel, at least, which will be more or less focused on ideas and not so much back and forth. So we're just gonna bring people in as we see fit. Do you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves and for people who are watching?
Yeah, I'm Fritz Imperial. I probably don't need the least introduction because you probably know me already. I guess I'm also part of the early sort of crowd from the Flying In. I remember the early ones from summer of last year, so I run my own channel.
Okay. I'm Benjamin McLean. I'm Latter-day Saint, and I make videos about philosophy and some video games.
And I am Snake is Ninja. I am a Catholic, and I make videos on a variety of things. I would consider myself a traditionalist.
Okay, so originally, by originally I mean months ago when I first announced this stream, there were kind of three possible topics we could do. The first one was the future of dissident right-wing movements online, favorite books and movies, and then general audience Q&A. I think in order for there to be general audience Q&A, there would have to be a lot more questions. Well, yeah, there had to be a lot more questions on Twitter than we're currently getting right now. At this point, it's just the people who are, we only have a handful of people watching. Maybe we'll get more to begin with. I mean, I guess the most topical of these three topics that we proposed was the first one about the future of dissident right-wing movements online. I guess if we haven't beat that to death, that might be interesting to talk about. What do people think?
I mean, I suppose, I think we could sort of take a bit of a look at what we've accomplished so far and at least building some form of makeshift community, which I think it's a step from 0 to 1, and I think we can be proud of that. But I'm thinking, how do we translate that into something, either IRL communities or, I think for online purposes, something that's not just a group of sort of vaguely, familiar people that make YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would suppose, like, the ultimate goal I would have, and I know it's a big stretch, would be creating some form of, like, media site that, has voices from a dissident right-wing Christian perspective as opposed to either the alt-right or the alt-right.
Yeah, I think that, in a lot of what the alt-right and a lot of other dissident right-wing people at this stage, to set the groundwork, they're all kind of suffering from the same thing at this point, where, I think at the same time this year, if you're clicking really hard, just mute yourself, so
sorry,
you don't get a lot of cross noise. I think at the same time this year, I think a lot of people were sort of thinking that these movements would sort of grow indefinitely with the cooperation of the platform. But at this point, I think that you're really seeing that people being skeptical and people thinking they need their own infrastructure, right? They need their own websites, they need their own funding sources. And that's sort of been the big challenge, is that all of these projects require more than just making a YouTube video. They require deep investment, web programming. They require, a lot of consolidation. They require people to be organized, not all go in their separate ways the second, drama emerges. And that's really been the challenge as far as I can see it.
Well, the technologies to do decentralized political speech online already exist. The only trick is just getting people to start using them instead of the standard stuff. That's the only real trick. And that's something we're probably not going to see, because you have to actually go out of your way to seek those things out. And but I really think that this attempt to suppress the alt-right online speech, we're going to see the alt-right go from growing in a linear fashion to growing exponentially over this. Because, the Streisand effect is real.
Yeah, there is that. I don't know. I've looked into alternative video sites, and they all have serious limitations to them. There's nothing that's like YouTube, that's for sure.
I would say, though, if I could comment on the alt-right, I think you're right, Ben. I think that I actually think it's going to continue to grow linearly because of the fact that you're going to have to counter the fact that they are underground, but the thing is, the entirety of the social structures in our society are against them, and so are demographics.
I suppose. I think the growth that Ben was thinking about was sort of a short-term, immediate exponential growth, not a long-term exponential growth.
Oh yeah, you don't just keep growing from you don't just keep growing from bannings and attempts to suppress that happened last week indefinitely. I'm just saying in the short term, we're going to see exponential growth. And the more these suppressions of speech online keep happening and keep getting publicized by the mainstream or the relatively mainstream right-wing media, we're going to see the alt-right picking up support that it's never had before. Because when leftists say something is bad and has to be banned and all that stuff, that gives it a kind of credibility that is just indispensable to a growing right-wing movement. If you can get progressives to say that you're horrible and awful and no one should listen to you and stuff, that is the best advertising you could possibly get.
Yeah, but you think the Republican Party would have better marketing then, wouldn't you? Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I was bringing it up as a counterexample, I guess. But my guess, I understand that, if the alt-right just gets hard banned off of YouTube, that's not going to be a benefit for them, because that's going to be a serious roadblock. They could overcome that, right? But
yeah, well, there's no way that they're going to be able to really keep the alt-right completely off YouTube, because it's like fighting what do you call it? Trying to fight a hydra. You chop off one head and a whole bunch more grow, and that's what's going to happen. There is it's a kind of an arms race, and even if YouTube's policies, try to stop. How do you say? Try to stop channels from getting big. Individual videos are still going to go viral through YouTube before they can be suppressed.
Perhaps. I'm always skeptical. I think there is a limit. I think that there is an anti-fragility effect to a certain extent, but nothing is ever totally anti-fragile. And if the step comes down hard enough, then I think you'll see a big problem, right? You'll see a big problem with these dissident movements. I guess if it's true that this anti-fragile Streisand effect is just it can be infinitely repeated over and over again, then there's no need for alternative platforms, because
Yeah, well, it depends on how the left is playing this. Because if they keep doing the stuff they've been doing in the past week, we're going to see exponential growth as long as they keep doing what they're doing. But if they start getting smarter about how they're doing this, and they start finding ways to censor and suppress things they don't like that are nice and quiet, like search bubbles, for example. And
I would imagine that Google is thinking just in that direction.
Yeah, I mean that's what's going to actually work out better for them. This idea they've had of putting videos that are controversial into a demonetized, no sharing, no commenting, but your video can still be embedded mode. That's very smart, because a video can have all the features necessary for it to sort of be successful socially taken away, but the media can't report that the video has been banned or blocked or taken down.
Yeah, which is why I think that, I think ultimately, I think the arms race between the Google and people trying to evade Google, if Google really wants to crush these people, it can.
Yeah, it's just they have to find smarter ways. Stealing the Daily Star Wars domain name, that just makes Google look really bad, and it makes a lot of people with domain names registered with Google think twice about registering with Google.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess I'm not sure what is really possible politically for them to do at this point. It does seem like it's
Stormer. I don't think they have any recourse. I mean, as far as I know.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much Google has really been hurt from that. I think it's been hurt a little bit. I guess the question I think Fritz brought up: do you need separate platforms or not? Right?
Do they need alternative platforms?
Does anybody in the anti-progressive side of the aisle need alternative platforms?
Couldn't hurt,
because couldn't hurt, but couldn't hurt.
I mean,
couldn't hurt sounds different when the price tag is millions of dollars.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
One at a time. One at a time, please. Okay, now somebody speak, please.
You have to call on somebody if you want us to go one at a time.
Okay, sorry. Anarcho? Was it Narco?
Sure. I would say at the moment it's not necessary, but I'm not ruling out that it might become necessary. We'd have to see what Google and YouTube do next. The thing is, they've tried. I'm speaking to YouTube specifically. They've had episodes where they've tried to clean up their engine, try to keep searches clear of any material that they don't want connected to their brand, and it hasn't. It's basically blown up in their face every time. So I'm hoping that happens again, and if that's the case, then no, it won't be necessary to start a completely new platform on the internet anyway. IRL's kind of a different story. Ben, you wanted to say something?
Oh, well, I was going to say, as far as it costing millions of dollars, if they go decentralized, then it doesn't cost millions of dollars. I mean, if we just, if everyone agreed to, we could just start using ZeroNet today, and it could host, it could be used to host blogs. I think it does videos, though I'm not sure on videos, but I know it does. I know it does blogs that are uncensorable. I think it should, in principle, do videos, because what ZeroNet is, it's essentially blockchain plus BitTorrent to host websites in a decentralized way. So instead of there being one server, every website is like a torrent, and everyone who's browsing it is helping to serve it. And another nice thing about that is those are immune to denial of service attacks.
Yeah. Snake, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that I think I do agree with you, Dave, in terms of I wouldn't be too optimistic about things. I mean, the biggest issue is demonetization. So these dissident right groups will experience a massive, a massive decrease in their revenues, and that's going to be largely negative. I mean, I suppose this might be good for these alt tech websites and different platforms. They'll get an uptick in people, in traffic over there, but maybe in the long term you'll see more of these kinds of content creators moving over there. But it's also a problem because ideally these kinds of groups want to reach a lot of people who are on these big services like YouTube. You want to reach as many people as possible, so you don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber.
Yeah, you don't want to be on the alt-right version of YouTube. That's just the whole purpose is destroyed at that stage.
We tried this with like a Christian version of YouTube at one point. That never went anywhere.
GodTube was just a bad idea to start with.
Exactly.
Though I might say that with something like ZeroNet, it really is a fundamentally different idea than something like Minds or Gab or what's the other one?
I mean, ZeroNet wouldn't be reliable, and it sort of makes it hard for people to get taken down. I'm not so sure it would work very well if you had, say, a video that suddenly got viral, and that video only had a few seeders. Think of what that would do.
Well, BitTorrent has proven over the past 15 years or whatever we've had BitTorrent.
Yeah, but it takes like 20 minutes to get BitTorrent to start downloading.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean,
BitTorrent doesn't let you immediately hit play the way YouTube does. That's true.
And that immediately hit play to see this awesome video, or to see, by the time the video downloads, you'll forget the reason why you clicked on it to begin with. That's the power of YouTube. Now, if you have 3 seeders and you're getting 10,000 people clicking on that video in a 24-hour period, which I have had happen to me, that would overwhelm my ISP or the upload limit I have on my internet service provider, right? So Comcast just wouldn't allow that.
Well.
So this is sort of the weakness of the thing.
Videos that go viral work extremely well on BitTorrent. Okay, but
look.
The thing about BitTorrent is the more people who want to watch, the faster the video is going to come down. The trouble is when a video isn't popular, then it's going to be slow.
In order for the video to go viral, it has to consistently play on demand, which is hard if you only have a few seeders.
Yeah, that's true. The BitTorrent
it's
infrastructure
not going to go viral. It's a chicken and the egg thing. Like you're saying, it would have a good playback ratio if there are millions of people watching it, but millions of people can't watch it until it's got a lot of people watching it. So This is the difficulty with trying to create viral content on totally distributed hosting services.
Yeah, BitTorrent works well when people already know what it is they want, but when they don't, then you need something more like streaming.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I was thinking a lot about this when I was thinking about doing, radio, right? Like continuously playing radio. What I still think is, I still think YouTube radio is a huge, is something that people continuous streaming content is a huge opportunity. But the problem with this is that, there's no way to get around the upload, right? There's no way to get around the upload. You have to have a computer that can continuously upload that content. If you don't, you're out of luck. Sorry, did I kill the conversation?
No, I'm not sure what you're talking about with YouTube radio. What do you mean?
Oh, so YouTube's pioneered sort of channels that can continuously upload content. So, for instance, people DJing essentially set playlists of new artists, of old old radio shows, of whatever they want, right? So you can tune into these radio.
Copyright is a problem, right?
Hold on. No, copyright actually isn't as operative. as you might think, because it's not on demand, right? So they don't get taken down as readily as people who have that particular thing on a click on demand. So for the time being, copyright isn't an issue, but even for older content, copyright isn't an issue because the older things before the 50s don't even have copyright on them, right? So this has been something that, you know, a lot of I've seen this sort of an opportunity. But at any rate, you know, the big limitation is if you want to create a continuously playing radio station, you have to continuously be able to upload, which is really difficult. It's expensive. It's like hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah.
At least.
Or wait, to continuously upload?
Yes.
I'm not sure why that would be hundreds of dollars a month.
Because Comcast and most ISPs charge much, much higher rates for digital upload than digital download.
Okay, well, my ISP, as far as I know, doesn't have caps.
Maybe if that's the case, I would look into doing that. But anyway, we were way in the weeds, guys. So I guess the question is answered that people don't feel we need separate sites, or the sense that they do, they think it'd be easy to create. Guys, I'd say please control your noise. This is being broadcast, okay?
Yeah, I don't think starting our own video site is at all feasible at this stage. What about other venues outside the online world?
What can you give me an example?
I like that I for one thing, I like seeing more.
Wait, you're saying there's life outside the online world?
Let me just finish. Like, I'm glad that we're now seeing more protests from, even though it hasn't gone well as of late, we're seeing a lot more protests of ideas, promoting ideas. So we have to be organized in that fashion. But I think actually getting out into the streets at this point would be far more, that's at least far more realistic than trying to create our own YouTube that would be accepting of our ideas, I think.
I mean, right now, I'm not so sure what capacity you have for street action. Or, I don't know, you'd have to tell me a specific thing you think would be really amenable to street action in the present environment.
Oh, I think we should probably do stuff like art festivals or something for the alt-right. You know, I think that would be pretty cool instead of...
Again, not that we're all... I mean, I know you're all right, but I'm not. But I mean, let's say conservative art festivals, for instance, right?
All right.
Like, do we have a lot of artists
art
in like one metropolitan area that could populate this? Like, you probably could put together an art festival with all of the people who do conservative art online right now. Unfortunately, they all live in different cities, scattered across the continent and maybe in Europe.
How does this help us if we even did it?
Well, that was the question I was throwing out. Do you think that?
Yeah, we're just brainstorming.
I mean, we'd actually like have fun. I mean, people complain about culture creation all the time, and then as soon as anyone gets any ideas to actually do it, then you complain that we're trying to do it. So,
well, the difficulty is just praising the amount of resources you have for this various actions, right? You know, a direct action is expensive, and it requires. And it requires, well, an issue to organize around, right? That's all I wanted to point out.
One of the main base of the right wing is the rural voter. So we could try doing something. I think what you're mentioning is the fact that we don't really have the urban artistic elite on our side. That's why art festivals is not a feasible, at least not immediately feasible idea. But What if something that appealed more to the countryside? Could we try to pursue that?
I think the online environment itself has some benefit in the fact that it doesn't care whether you live in Nebraska or San Francisco. You can come online and get your ideas out. And sort of this operates like a virtual place where you can exchange ideas among people who don't live in areas where it's really, really easy to organize on the ground to exchange ideas. So that's one way in which the online has been so invaluable to the distant right wing, right? You don't have money, you don't have a centralized location. It used to be you had nothing, but with online, you kind of have something.
Well, if we stick to the online route, what would we do to try to keep us from being censored off YouTube and Google?
Well, I think we were just discussing that. I mean,
well, we were discussing creating our own website, which is not at, I don't even see.
Well, your two options are to go with the existing infrastructure that's cheap, or to drop money, and I frankly don't see any way around dropping money.
Why not use Minds and Gab and VidMe and all those guys?
Not as popular.
Well, yeah,
I'm pretty sure VidMe takes down videos too.
VidMe has a censorship policy. Dailymotion has serious limitations on its interface, and Minds.com is just not in a place where it can get you an audience, right? And so there's sort of trade-offs. I mean, if every single dissident person moved to Minds.com and decided that that was the investment point, then you might have a possibility for starting something. But outside of that, for the current being, there's a problem with that, right?
I mean, yeah, that I will say though that everyone leaving YouTube and going to Minds does sound much better than starting our own Minds or YouTube. But
well, here's the thing: saying your objection against Minds is that it's not as popular. Well, anything that we sink money into isn't going to be as popular when it's first starting either.
Yeah, nothing will be, and that's another big disadvantage, right?
But if we really are being effectively censored from YouTube, then we have to go somewhere.
Yeah, and I think this is obviously sort of the call that everyone's making right now, right? It's obvious that the ban hammer is coming at some point. So, do you want to get an early start off, or do you want?
I would recommend
guys, hold on. Point of order.
Oh,
you
sorry.
Gotta let people finish their sentences. This is the third time I've had my sentence cut off before it was even done. Okay, so people can decide how fast they want to be out of the door ahead of the ban hammer. But at this point, it seems that some kind of ban hammer is coming. That's what you have to deal with, right?
I would recommend that everyone mirror their videos somewhere in addition to YouTube.
That's a good idea.
Aren't we already doing that? A lot of people do that anyways.
Yeah,
Woes is doing that.
That's sort of the current best practices. So,
can you explain what the censorship on VidMe is? Well, I was not aware that was a thing.
I can't. I just know that they do it.
Look, Ben. Just for point of time, this has been well documented in other locations. So, just so we don't start spending a lot of time rehashing, we can continuously go on, I guess, from this.
Well, I've been watching the whole censorship thing online pretty close, and if I haven't heard about this, then it's probably pretty obscure.
Well, I don't know. Does anyone have the information handy?
Well, if they do, they can link it in the chat.
Yes, link it in the chat if you have it handy.
Okay.
Well, so I guess sort of the next point, I guess, is just well, I think if we're kind of looking back on this channel, I think a lot of sort of the coming apart has kind of continued apace in this country, and so you're also just seeing relationships fray all over the place, and I think people are sort of wondering what is eventually going to give, right? So that's, I don't know. I mean, let me see if I can find the rest of this question here. This is going to be an incredibly disorganized stream. I apologize, guys. Future of the dissident right wing online. Well, I don't know. I think the future of the dissident right wing online is probably pretty bright in a certain regard. It's, I think it's sort of connecting that to something that's offline that strikes me as sort of the more difficult step, right? Hello?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this has been a problem that hasn't just been a problem for the right. It's been a problem for all political movements online. But we're increasingly seeing just naturally more and more of a crossover going on, more and more seems like every election cycle. And I mean, this time around, we've seen more reporting on the president's Twitter feed than on the budget.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I mean the Trump presidency has been, in some sense, it's been an online phenomenon, but I think the bigger challenge is just that again, I mean, if you're a fringe progressive movement, you have an ability to organize on the ground the way that most conservative movements do not, because of how you're located, because of how you're connected to people in power, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's always been really a challenge. You have a bunch of people who have reactionary ideas, then you get a bunch of sort of like standard conservative people who are very status quo, and it's not so easy to see how support or money flows from one group to the other. Where in most major metropolitan areas, you see sort of a very real connection between the old school liberal establishment and the new radical progressivism on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if we could call, unfortunately, a lot of mainstream conservatives anything, you might call them unimaginative. That they don't seem to be able to sort of get out of the sort of post-war consensus liberal box, and they don't seem to be able to think about like new possibilities of solutions. Or even worse, a lot of them don't even seem to understand the problem that exists. They still think that the post-war consensus exists and that it's not been completely, and the treaty has been completely violated by the left.
Well, again, when as I've said before, I don't know if I've said it online publicly, but when you start talking like that, it sounds to me like you're trying to talk yourself into an excuse to carte blanche, be tyrannical next time you're in power.
Well, I mean, that's the sort of thinking that's exactly the problem, is that anytime you sort of say, maybe we can think outside of the post-war consensus box, mainstream conservatives just say that they equate that to saying you're a Nazi.
Well, yeah, but you haven't succeeded in differentiating yourself from that yet. So how is what you're saying different?
Differentiating yourself from what?
Not just from being a Nazi, but from going in a totalitarian direction.
Well, I don't think that they're outside of the Nazis and the communists. I don't really see many totalitarian societies that existed before the post-war consensus.
I think what Fritz is saying is that perhaps might be found in the distinction between authoritarian and totalitarian.
Oh, okay.
Then also,
what is the distinction? Can you describe it for the audience, please?
Well, the distinction, authoritarian governments are a variety of governments that have total monopolistic control over political power, and where all political power derives from association with that authority, whereas totalitarian regimes are much more an invention of the 20th century, and they focus on sort of controlling not only the political polis, but also the media expression, to the extent that they're trying to sort of mold the population around a particular ideology rather than just loyalty.
Yeah,
Okay.
the way I would describe it is authoritarianism would be I am the state, whereas totalitarianism would be
The state is
dictator
everything.
and society.
Okay,
am
well,
society,
I think the term I was looking for then was probably just despotism.
So you think that basically everything? I mean, that's the thing, right? Is it's like the idea that anybody that disagrees with the post-war liberal consensus is an authoritarian.
Well, if all you say is that you disagree with it, but you haven't presented an alternative yet, then that seems to associate you with what the popular alternatives are.
I'm not. Where are you getting this from? Like, why are you saying everyone on the dissident right is despotism? They're into.
I think a more
tyranny
interesting
or
question
something?
might be pressed. If I
No.
don't, not to interrupt you, Jolly, but okay, well, go ahead, Ben, answer the question.
Oh, I was going to say no, because a lot of the people on the dissident right have a story to tell that's not just, oh, we need to get rid of the post-war consensus or liberalism is dead. You know, if that's all you say, then that does seem to associate you with some rather unsavory characters. But that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, because some people might have an actual alternative to articulate.
Okay, so
But
why not?
The objection I'd like to kind of come in here with is just, I'm not so sure that this idea of this sort of idea of liberty or liberalism can really survive the sort of societal changes that we've seen, behaviorally or demographically or what have you. I mean, this is always the real issue here, right? If we're entering a situation where 40 or 50% of the Democratic Party, and maybe in about 10 years, 70 or 80% of the Democratic Party thinks that free speech is a tool of white privilege, then the game you will be playing by pursuing liberty is the following. We take power, everyone gets to speak. You take power, only you get to speak. That's a losing game. And I'm not saying that I want to live in a society that has no free speech. I'm not saying that I want to, not have liberty, but I recognize that if you have a population, a voting bloc of 30, 40% who are actively hostile to these things, it's just not going to occur. And if you try to hold out hope that this is some kind of universal principle and not, a specific emergent property of historical circumstances, you're going to find yourself in the middle of a very, very quick ratchet motion that's not going to be very comfortable for you to be in.
Yeah, I actually was about to just say something very similar to that. Line distributors is the fact that it's not. This doesn't really, the idea of whether or not I personally agree with the idea of freedom of speech as a universal principle. That's not really the main issue I have. That's the issue I have is, from what I'm seeing, is that the circumstances around which that idea can exist don't really seem to apply very much anymore, because of the fact that, again, if you look at liberalism as a treaty, in terms of the idea of free speech as a treaty that both parties, that everyone in society agrees to respect each other's speech, the left has broken that treaty over and over again. And so I just don't see really what the point is of, I mean, right now it's like, it seems like a lot of anti-progressive conservatives they're trying to uphold their end of the free speech bargain when the progressives have continuously violated it.
It's actually not so much that progressives have violated it that's the problem. I mean, there's always specific abuses. And if you were talking to a progressive right now, he would say, oh, well, conservatives violated these sort of abstract liberal principles many times in the 90s, and the 60s, and the 30s, and the 1920s. The point really isn't that there have been particular abuses, and the particular abuses have fallen on the progressive side. The particular problem we're seeing right now is, I mean, I'm just looking at my Facebook feed, and it's just like column after column explaining about how Antifa is heroic, despite the fact that they're committed to violence against people who didn't initiate violence. a Washington Post article that says that conservative speakers, that censoring all conservative thought on campus is the better of the two options of allowing them to have a platform on campus. I mean, this is stuff. This isn't like left-wing rags. These are the mainstream publications. It's not really the specific abuses. It's the fact that there's an elite that does not feel necessary to commit in the abstract to the protection of these concepts for people who disagree with them. And if that's the case, then this elite has, again, the backing of how much of the population? 30, 40, 50%?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what game you're playing. It doesn't seem like it's a winnable one, at least.
Well, okay, so your alternative is?
I think the alternative is to, I mean, the alternative is this is going to be what happens. What's going to happen is that people are going to break into their own institutions. They're going to basically, they're going to start splitting, institutions down the center. Guys, you have to control your noise. Okay, please mute yourself if you're in a high noise environment. If I think what's going to happen is what it's not really actionable. I mean, I wish it was. I don't see an action to prevent it. I think what's going to happen is these institutions are just going to be broken up, right? There's going to be conservative colleges, and there's going to be conservative educational institutions, and there's going to be the mainstream progressive institutions, right? And these are going to operate in some kind of semi-cooperation, semi-competition, but they're not going to be under similar observation or management.
Okay. But what you're saying then is the alternative is to create right-wing alternatives that do not have freedom of speech, but only allow right-wing.
I don't know what you get. Well, one, yes, you kind of have to do that. I mean, isn't there that law? I don't know the name of it, but any institution that isn't explicitly left-wing becomes, isn't explicitly right-wing becomes left-wing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're playing these games. They're okay. Okay, you can't play fair with people who aren't following the rules here, and you're setting up these arbitrary rules, and these people are obviously not going to follow them. So I don't know what you want. I mean,
especially given
dirty
their background. I mean, these are postmodernists we're dealing with. They reject the idea of ethical standards in concept.
It's conquest second law. That's what it's typically called. Conquest second law, and that is any organization that is not explicitly right-wing sooner or later becomes left-wing, and it's effectively true. It sort of follows the Mencius Mollbug, this observation that there is in fact a direction of history, and the fact that history does have this progressive direction is sort of the major failing of sort of mainstream conservative movements. And I think at the end of the day, when progressive institutions at the rate they're going effectively become just for progressive people to communicate their ideas, Ben, are you going to sit down and create a college that, splits up the time 50-50? Like out of your own money?
I don't know. I mean,
so they got all of your tax money for these colleges. And on top of that, you're going to set aside half of your finance money, hypothetically, if you're starting a school, to explicitly hire progressive professors, so they get that too.
Well, no, but that's conservative colleges as they exist now don't do that.
Oh well, but that's the point, right? That's what effectively is going to happen, right?
Okay. Well, this commitment to liberal principles that you're referring to, that mainstream conservatives have a commitment to, is in regard to political actions by the government, to the extent that we get in power politically.
There's a sort of similar problem there too. You understand, right?
You switched contexts away from that into funding private universities.
Well, no, but the critique is similar, right?
Okay, so how does the critique work when it comes to actual policies in
So
government.
okay, so for instance, if we were to say if the Democrats get into office and they're like, okay, we're going to cut all, we're going to totally let's say we're going to totally decredential all conservative universities, which this has been on their agenda for a very long time, right? And so as soon as the Democrats get into power, all conservative universities get decredentialed, right? It would almost be foolish not to try to do a similar thing against the progressive institutions, right? Because then it's just like all your conservative institutions have the sort of Damocles hanging over their head. And if the conservatives gain power, then nobody gets punished. You see, this is what's called game theory, right? Like, I lament with you the decline, but I understand that this is going to go on, right? Nobody's going to be like, okay, the Democrats win, then Democrats win. All progressive colleges get millions of dollars more in aid, and the conservative colleges get banned, decredentialed, and sanctioned. And if the conservatives win, then status quo. That's not. No one's going to play a game like that. And if you do, you'll lose.
Well, so far they haven't decredentialed conservative universities.
Oh, they have actually in Canada.
Oh, in Canada, I see.
Okay, but if you don't think this is coming here,
well, well, if it does come here, then we absolutely should take radical actions. Yeah.
Okay, but this radical action, and I'm just noticing a pattern in history. The radical action will result in a basic, I think, basically the only agreement they can be come to, which is that you have separate institutions for these sides, because there's no reigning idea that can keep them in check as it stands right now.
Okay. Though, if we were to follow your theory a little bit further,
this is a predictive, not a prescriptive theory. Just to be clear.
Okay. Well, you're using it to critique a prescriptive theory, so. That's the trouble.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. That's a fair critique. That is a fair critique.
To an extent.
Okay, Anarcho, do you want to elaborate?
I'm just going to say, yeah, there is an interplay between descriptive and prescriptive that cannot be ignored. If I make the prescriptive statement that it is moral that we have to fly, then clearly I'm not really saying
do implies
anything.
Can. Or should implies can. I'm sorry.
Exactly. I think that's where the descriptive can be a legitimate critique against the prescriptive if the prescriptive is not even attainable.
Right. So
yeah,
what you're saying,
I think. Sorry. Go ahead.
What you're saying is we can't be morally obligated to uphold the contract of liberalism because we can't uphold the contract of liberalism.
In this particular field that we've been using it as an example, it's fairly obvious, I'd say. I don't think that you're going to get some kind of reigning marketplace of ideas almost anywhere.
Yeah, we can't pursue a plan that's suicidal to the very cause we're trying to fight for. We can't pursue a path that requires us to violate the principles we're fighting for, but we also can't pursue a path that is suicidal. We have to find some kind of middle ground that manages us to avoid both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is sort of, I don't know. I think people will increasingly learn this just from bitter experience. I think that the conservative movement to this point has been an unmitigated failure at learning this lesson. Maybe the progressives will just win this war of institutions, but insofar as they don't outright win it, it will result in a separated America. Ideologically.
When would you say the conservative movement started? Right. When would you say?
I'm talking about the post-war conservative movement. There were conservative movements before the post-war conservative movement.
I mean, the conservatives have had like 70 years, and they've had, all this money, and they've had all this support. So I think we have to assume that this was their plan, because things have gone so bad that I don't think
We don't have.
I'm sorry, you're violating a fundamental rule of thought.
Law of charity, I think, or principle of charity.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Never attribute to malice what can be better attributed to stupidity and incompetence.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I was going to say. I think the idea is that the problem is that I don't think conservatives actually had any idea of a plan. They were sort of comfortable with the post-war consensus, and they wanted to keep it that way. And they wanted to. They understood change was happening, but they wanted to keep it as slow and as controlled as possible. The problem is that I guess in a short and intermediate time that can be useful. The problem that is in the long term, if you don't actually have any outline or plan for society, people are just going to naturally follow, as bad as it may be, what the solution that who actually has a plan. And the progressives did have a outline of society, and it was utopian, and people, and they were the ones starting to teach our children in colleges, and that's where we got to where we are now, where the conservatives just don't have any ability to the idea of them slowing down the change, it's just the real damage has already been done, and they can't and it's what's the point of really slowing it, because they can't anymore.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I just mean there are way too many coincidences for me to think that it's just stupidity for almost 100 years.
I don't know. The problem with trying to identify coincidences post hoc is that you can fool yourself with randomness very, very easily. Coincidences have to occur sort of after you make some kind of prediction, right? They can't be done by backcasting onto history. You'll fall into any kind of conspiratorial thinking at that point.
Perhaps I could jump in just to respond to the free speech thing we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
Personally, I'm a free speech fundamentalist, I guess. But I do see kind of the dilemma you face when you have, like a treaty or some kind of agreement. I mean, think of this as if it's a wartime situation, like mutually assured destruction. The only purpose of, we will all agree to allow everyone's ideas to be exchanged freely. The only purpose of that is the idea that no one will want to violate this first, because they will initiate a chaotic place that no one wants to be in. If someone initiates this and starts to censor, this agreement is kind of null and void now. It's no longer. I think it's an inappropriate response to, for example, if an enemy nation launches a nuke to pretend like you're still in this period of a treaty, it's no longer appropriate to the situation.
Yes, I'm not understanding how that. Can you sort of contrast that with what was already been said, I guess? Or
well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't know. I can understand why people want to sort of fight fire with fire, which obviously is not ideal, but you have to address the fact that we are now in a different phase than the kind of free speech phase. I guess that's what I was getting at. And one more thing I would say is that you do kind of have a problem when you are in these situations, because if there's no kind of prevailing doctrine, I'm not a fan of the kind of prevailing progressive left doctrine where they'll kick you out if you disagree with it. But if it's just an empty space, you kind of face the same problem you face with secularism or liberalism, which is it's just a vacuum. People will naturally gravitate towards some kind of doctrine, and you haven't solved the problem. You've just put it off. It's sort of like a cop-out.
No, I disagree. I think that progressives, liberals and the skeptics and the atheists, they that's the vacuum. The progressivism has a vision for the world that is positive in the sense that they have things they offer for. They're not just against. The obvious, the problem is, of course, that we find people like us naturally find the progressive vision of the world to be deeply, deeply flawed, to use the most modest of terms. The thing is just the fact that, yeah, you're right, Snake, that, I mean, this is the whole thing, isn't it? It's just, we don't exist in a, like, we keep having this mindset of that we have the free marketplace of ideas and that the progressives don't, and it seems people are just starting to understand that progressives, that doesn't actually exist, nor has ever existed, and that progressives have no interest in upholding these values because they upheld these values so long as it, during the culture wars in the 90s and 2000s against conservative Christianity, they were marching side by side with liberals because of the fact that they had a common goal. And now, when they have complete control over almost every single institution, they don't really need to bother with liberalism anymore.
Well, wait. You're saying there never was a free marketplace of ideas, and actually, yeah, there was.
I mean,
say there isn't now, but there was.
I mean, I might be hyperbolic, but it's more in the sense that the idea that there was places that there was a time or place where people could sort of just express and exchange ideas in this sort of perfect vacuum, free of bias. I don't think that's ever existed.
Okay, I don't think that's what the phrase "marketplace of ideas" meant, though.
No, I think I see Ben's point. I mean, when 99% of the, or when 95% of your population thinks that free speech is some kind of inviolable value, you will have very strong ideas of free speech. When this becomes a particular purpose of a party, I am not so sure you will. Unless that party only cares about free speech and no other issues regarding culture.
You mean like the Republicans these days?
Well, okay, but there you go. There's a reason why you said it with that inflection in your voice, right? And that's because everyone understands the very sad nature of what it means to be a Republican. What it means to be a Republican is to be a political entity marching towards its own doom, right?
Or it means to be,
I was saying that
a soft Democrat.
I was saying
guys, I can't hear either of you say, so...
I was saying that because of the libertarian takeover of the Republican Party and how libertarianism has been replacing fusionist conservatism.
Well, sure, but that just goes more to the point I was just making, right?
Okay.
The Republican Party, if it's just liberalism, that does not work. That's not a political party. That is one end of a scissor being used against a fully operative political platform. And this whole thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that sort of relitigating why the Republican Party is failing, and just to segue us, since we've been at this an hour, I think we're all on the same page that this isn't working, right? So we can move on. Like we're agreeing that this isn't working, right?
I would like to move on, yes.
Well,
sure.
Yeah, but I think this is all agreed, right?
Well,
what's being tried here isn't working.
You still have the problem of the alternative to liberalism.
The alternative to liberalism is immaterial until more people in this country believe in it. Until that point, your choice in a society that has 50% people who don't believe in liberalism, which is what we're heading towards.
Ben,
will not be liberal. It will not be liberal. Your choice is whether you want to be, your cultural force is going to be alive or dead in this non-liberal society. Now, if you lobby, because regardless of whether a society is liberal or authoritarian, any political entity responds to political lobbying. If you lobby for your own survival, you have a chance. But if liberalism is dead if 50% of the people in this country don't believe in it. And we're heading in that direction.
Okay, so all you're saying is lobby exclusively for the advantage of traditionalist-oriented institutions.
That's pretty much the only option you have.
And
Why not?
drop all allies.
Drop what allies?
Any allies. The libertarians, the
I think you can consider them allies all you want. I'm sure there's a lot of things we'd agree with on libertarians.
They've been allies in the past, is all I'm saying.
What do they require? Okay, hold on, Ben. What do they require us to be allies of us? Do they require us not to lobby for our own ideological interests? Is that what they require in order for them to be our allies?
Well, you brought up the example of colleges, and the ability to have colleges depends on a legislative framework that so far has depended on liberalism.
Which is dead, obviously, right?
Right. So what you're saying is instead of lobbying for the right to have privately funded colleges in general, just lobby for our particular colleges. Seems to be what you're...
That's an option to put on the table. Now, I think the way to phrase it, the bone you throw at libertarians is, look, guys, if we will love to have neutral colleges. You guys go for that, but until you do, we're not walking away from lobbying for our own interests, and that's just what has to be said at this point, right? Like, because it's ridiculous. You're saying like, no, they're saying like, throw down your arms unilaterally. I'm all for pacifism, but like throwing down your arms when the opponent doesn't have theirs, it's not pacifism. I mean, if you're saying that like we're going to die for liberalism, our culture is going to die for liberalism, then buckle up to be like a libertarian, buckle up to the podium and go, I want Western culture to die for liberalism. Say that, but don't feed me frankly unbelievable stuff. Hold on. About how we can essentially embrace totally liberal principles while our opponents essentially bleed off the public coffers, and all because we want to keep allies with libertarians. I don't believe it. I don't at least.
What allies are you talking about, Ben? Because you only said libertarians.
You said libertarians.
That was the first. That would be the first group.
Okay, what are the other ones?
Just anyone who would want to have a privately funded college. Which groups would want to have?
They can lobby for their own interests in setting up those private colleges. That's what data is saying. Traditionalists lobby for traditionalist private colleges. Libertarians do the same thing for libertarians.
Or libertarians could be a splinter in the government that said, hey guys, we got to keep publicly funded colleges more fair, in which case they can apply whatever rules they get passed equally to conservative colleges as they do to progressivist ones, right?
Right.
But in the meantime, I'm not throwing down my arms because libertarians have some concept that the government works in some way and manifestly does not.
What do you mean throwing down your arms? What does that mean?
I mean, not explicitly. I'm sorry. Is other people having difficulty with this? I'm sorry. I'm getting angry. I apologize.
I think I understand what you've been saying.
I mean, essentially not using elements of the government that can directly fund your own institutions that are directly sympathetic to your ends culturally in an unapologetic fashion.
Okay, well,
is that clarification?
I'm just trying to see how this amounts to a legislative agenda that's different from the ones the conservatives have been pursuing so far.
I think it's a more aggressive legislative agenda. It's one that starts calling into question whether we should, decredential certain progressive colleges. It's one that starts preemptively. It's one that ditches the whole notion that it's the conservatives' job to embrace liberalism. It's the conservatives' job to lobby for traditionalist institutions.
Okay, well, it seems to me that the conservatives that we've got now and have had for 20 years are pretty much on the verge of looking at decredentialing these radical progressive colleges.
Well, Godspeed on that. I think we are at concordance. Are there any more questions on this topic?
We should pick another topic because
let's move
no,
on.
I think I was actually about to segue when we kind of got onto we kind of redid the whole tangent. I think
Okay, sorry.
Well, okay, so I think that well, I in some sense I lost my train of thought. I think we were continuing on the thread of whether of the future of dissident right-wing movements. I guess I was sort of thinking about what sort of immediately we're hoping to see emerge, right? Like signs of hope. So here's what I was thinking. Like, we're talking a lot about ways that things are going poorly. We're talking a lot about how there's all this agglomerated power against the ends that we're seeking. Anyone see any green shoots? Anyone see any opportunities? I am a firm believer of the fact that as money becomes more centralized and the power of your opponents increases, more avenues of an attack open up.
I'm a bit confused.
So I'm just asking if people think that there are any hopeful opportunities.
Well, yeah, I mean, strategically, there's a great metaphor there, because the bigger your enemy is, the more places there are to attack him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the bigger army he has, the bigger his supply lines have to be, and you can attack his supply lines. Or just the bigger he is, the less mobile he is, and you can outrun him. Or yeah, and so I think there's a good that's going to be a good metaphor going forward. That the institutions that run the world, run the United States, they have to keep vital services running, and in many ways we don't, and that's going to make us mobile in ways they're not.
There are probably a lot of people who are angry at Google right now. I wonder who they are. I bet they exist.
You were going off topic because I wanted to say something that doesn't relate to that.
Well, okay.
As a weakness I see. I think,
go for it.
I think, trying to exploit the idea that the fact that, the seemingly endless amount of college debt, because I think offering prospective students an alternative education that will actually help, start getting them jobs that's more effective and that's not completely run by progressives.
Mm-hmm. That's a possibility too, right?
I think another thing would be, if we're going to take it politically, lobbying that students be allowed to default on their student loans. Because that would make it so that they.
I think that
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
I think that would lead to an economic collapse.
I think it would too. There are certain problems that are involved in the fact that essentially the government's guaranteed those loans so that people would actually make them. And once a government like ours goes around saying that billions of dollars of debt that it guaranteed is no longer guaranteed, that has ripple effects onto our currency that you can't imagine. So
now, on the other hand, if we could we'd have to water it down a little bit to get past progressive circles. But if you just make it so that the government take on part of the debt, but still promise to pay it off, that would not cause any sort of market crisis while still affecting the exact same consequence that Fritz was proposing.
Well, having the government absorb the debt, I mean, indefinitely, like going forward.
Well,
how about I have a suggestion.
I mean, we've already put so many other stupid things on the credit card, including the Iraq War. So I'm not really going to get worried about penny pinching now.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're already heading for an economic crash, probably one of the worst ones in history, no matter what. So it doesn't even matter.
Well, what about this? What if students below a certain income get some part or even all, if they have super low income, of their student loan payments made or subsidized by the government based on income?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
But guys, I mean, without modification to the present system, all we're doing is opening up more governmental revenue systems that feed directly into universities.
Yeah, I was about to say that this sounds like something. This sounds like it would have the. This is like helping do the complete opposite of what we want. We want students to stop. We want prospective students to stop going to progressive universities. We want the money to stop flowing into these places.
Oh, actually. Well, then you have to start the accounts before the. I mean, I had kind of a thought about this. I think Singapore has something similar with healthcare and education. They have accounts that are paid into that through savings accrued from each family that are then used to decide to basically then the parents decide what schools to pay their kids to go to, and that would offer a lot. It's fairly similar to the voucher idea that Ben is in favor of, but give the parents a lot more dynamic in what they want their kids to learn. And this would be in all levels of education. If you could set some avenue,
if you set some avenue under which the money that we already have set aside for these progressive credentialed universities could be siphoned off onto alternative institutions that aren't controlled by the four-year system, that would be something to explore politically, I'd say. But I think that would be the exact direction I would go. I wouldn't try to offload student debt onto the government and then normalize that. I mean, unless you're just expecting a huge economic catastrophe to wipe everything out, it's a long-term mistake and it's a long-term liability.
Yeah, and I think the progressives are going to do it anyway.
Oh, they will certainly try to do that. That's exactly what they want.
Yeah,
they want to have all universities operate under the rules of independent corporations, but with being 100% financed on the back of the federal state, which is, I mean, it's its obvious advantages, right?
Yep. But progressives are against the corporation in favor of the little man, remember?
So that is the vulnerability I wanted to talk about, right? Because that's the new vulnerability that's opening up, right? All these other vulnerabilities, it's old news, right? But what you've seen now is you've seen the progressive corporation. There are people out there who don't like corporations. Regardless, they don't like the conglomeration of power. People who are a lot of practice fighting against them. You know, I want this is going to fracture reaching out to these people. You know, who are the people who hate Google in the Bay Area? Who are the people who hate corporations like I don't know, Amazon or Apple, or any of these big companies that are these progressive bulwarks? I mean, they exist. They're not right wing yet.
Just remind me, what has Amazon done that's particularly progressivist?
Well, a lot of local things in Seattle. I mean,
oh right, okay.
I mean, nothing. I guess nothing recently that's been like a CNN headline, but I mean,
yeah.
Do you think
I
CNN
assure
would do
you,
that?
okay, but the Google thing was a CNN headline, so apparently it does. Right? There hasn't been any big news about Amazon, but it's. I assure you, it's the same organization of.
Probably under the hood, certainly, but at least publicly.
And even above the hood, they explicitly support these progressive institutions. They explicitly support, open borders, immigration, all of these things. They're totally committed to this vision of borderless, identityless world.
Okay, so, all I was going to say was that so far they, as far as I know, Amazon hasn't been engaging in censorship, as far as I know.
Okay, but I mean, are we going to wait till it happens before we prepare for it? I guess this is. I feel like people should.
I just thought that because you mentioned them that you knew of something that I might have missed. Oh. I'm just trying to keep track of all this. Is all.
Okay, I don't know. I can confirm people's factual knowledge about these organizations later. I assure you that they are in the same position as Apple.
Yeah, they're in a tech company. They're in the Bay Area. Therefore, they're staffed by a bunch of hippies. Sure.
So there's an opportunity that sort of opens itself up for us by looking at people who don't like corporations, reaching out, talking to them. That maybe they get deplatformed, right? Maybe they feel like they're not getting their voice heard on the left. That's a lot of opportunities there, I think.
I don't know. I think the only way we're going to get anywhere is if an economic collapse happens, the one you're talking about.
Well, the problem is it's not actionable, so.
Yeah, defeatist reactionism is just not a winnable strategy.
I know I've been planning this alt-right series for a long time. Believe me, it's coming, but...
I've been hearing about the inevitable collapse for more than 10 years now.
Hold on, Ben. What I was saying was... I think a big problem with this whole collapse is going to give us victory thing is you don't understand that the collapse is going to hurt you too. It's not like the collapse isn't going to explode and then like, you know, the progressive side is going to be the only one impacted. It's going to be something felt everywhere. And so all it is just a huge opportunity for chaos. Guys, please wait till I put a period before you come in. Go ahead.
The idea I've seen from a lot of like, especially alt-right people, is they think that the collapse is going to happen. Like there's going to be bums and like it's going to be Mad Max outside, and they're going to be sitting in their cozy little house with a cup of hot chocolate, and then they can emerge victorious. That's not going to happen. You know, if there's a collapse,
I'm not saying
everybody's screwed.
Sorry, pardon me. I'm not saying even that. I'm saying that. You know, if a collapse happens, you don't know what's going on, right? Because all of a sudden your opponents want to do desperate things, and you don't know what they're willing to do, right? Yeah. So you log on to make a video. Someone doxes you. Does the dox mean you lose your job? Does the dox mean people with machetes show up at your house, right? What does it mean? In a situation where you're accelerating decline, it's not clear.
Well, it's not so much that we're accelerating a decline because I'm not really an accelerationist, but the collapse is going to happen, and it's probably going to happen sometime around 2030. I mean, Ben, you mentioned people have been talking about the collapse for a while now. Well, things have been collapsing, so I'm not sure, you know, what happened in 2008. So what, that was 9 years ago. So there was a collapse there, and we're taking steps down.
I don't think I was personally impacted by the collapse of 2008 in any way, as far as I could tell.
That's just one step down.
Okay, but guys, this is advice. Don't put dates on collapse like this. Don't plan around societal collapses occurring at specific dates or specific 5-year periods. I mean, this is just people who study history know that these things are unpredictable.
Well, I'm predicting.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, if somebody in 1870 says, well, the stock market is going to crash, well, they're right, but it's not going to crash until 1931. So telling us this in 1870 isn't really telling us anything.
The stock market crashed plenty of times.
Yeah, it crashed in the Harding administration worse than it did in 1929 under Hoover, actually.
I'm sorry, that's not my point. My point is, if you're predicting that something's going to happen where it's the sort of thing that kind of thing happens periodically, so it's inevitably going to happen, you're really telling us much, are you?
I'm telling you, it's probably going to happen around 2032 is the year that I keep seeing.
But why? I mean, why? I mean, first of all, before I go on to the final question, guys, can I ask a big favor? We probably will continue this for another half an hour, or maybe.
Well, I've got to go.
Okay, but the big favor.
Sorry, it's getting late.
Okay, so the big favor is, please, if you're going to correct somebody, like kind of correct them along the intention of their point. Don't try to nail them on like some like historical detail that like wasn't along the direction of their point. But if you
Sorry,
have to
I'm a
go, we'll
historian,
see.
That's what I have to do.
Not really. Ben, have a good night then. We'll see you later, okay?
All right, thanks. Sorry, guys. I just
All right, no problem.
It's too late here.
Good night.
But
Yes. Okay, so why do you think this is the thing? Like 2032, who came up with that date? And based on what?
it's 2 years before 2030.
Jolly Croc?
Hold on. I mean, there are a couple things I could look up, but I don't know. Isn't that when we start hitting decline in oil? That might be 2050, but we're going to hit a lot of declines in like fish stocks and oil around that time, or maybe 2050. It's either one of those two dates. But I keep seeing, I couldn't bring it all up now. Doesn't matter. If you guys think it's a generalization. Well, it is based on stuff, but I'm predicting. I mean, you guys can believe it or not, but I'm saying shit is probably going to get really bad at 2030. It's going to get really bad at some point within the next 15 years. I mean, that's if nothing happens or not, if everything goes crazy or if absolutely everything stays the way it's going. Inaction is still a loss in this case, so things are going to get worse no matter what. It can just be dramatic and noticeable, or it can just be a silent thing that happens and no one really notices. So the West is going to die, pretty soon in the next couple decades, or it's going to have to go through some kind of dramatic movements here. So it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter if we go through Mad Max. We're still dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to destroy us in the long run. It's just we have to deal with it in the next few decades.
It matters a lot because if you think you're going to go into Mad Max, you buy shotguns and gold and home security systems.
I don't think society is going to fall to Mad Max. I think that's a little exaggerated, but it's probably.
That doesn't matter, right? I mean, if you're thinking about what to do, it absolutely matters, right?
I mean, Data's point still stands. Specifically, whatever you think the future is going to look like, you're going to plan accordingly. You're not just going to say like, oh, in 30 years, we're all going to be underwater, but I'm not going to buy any scuba gear. I mean, if you want to just drown, that's one thing.
Well,
but
I'll put it this way. In the next couple decades, within my lifetime, right? So let's say within the next 4 decades, we got to do something, and it doesn't matter what happens. The right wing or whatever is going to have to do something to save our societies, because if we don't, one way or another, they're going to be gone. They're going to perish. And I'm only saying that if there is an economic collapse, like I think there's going to be something pretty dramatic, that is going to be the best way to capitalize on it, to try and change society, right? To use
the difficulty is that when that collapse happens, you also feel the collapse, not just your opponents. That's the problem.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, there's nothing to lose on my side, so I have everything to gain. Sure. Okay,
are
food, I guess.
Nothing to lose but your chains kind of guy?
I mean, so food, I mean, what do I have? I mean, there's not a culture, there's not a higher purpose. I don't have like a people or a nation I'm trying to preserve here. I'd be fighting for everything. So I'm not really sure. I mean, would I be losing food? Would I be losing, a house, I guess? I don't really have a house, but I'm just not seeing what's so precious.
So, I mean, I guess you could say that, like, well, I have nothing to live for there. I mean, if you have nothing to live for, then you'll always be a more effective revolutionary than your opponents. But the problem is that you have to imagine that they've got a bunch of people who have nothing to live for either, right? So
you have Antifa.
Okay, there you go, right? I mean,
that's kind of a joke there. Yeah, I know, but we really, I mean, I don't know what your point is. I mean, it's just how it's going to have to be. I mean, there's going to be physical confrontation here at one point.
Of organizing online is if you're preparing for a civil war. I guess if you're preparing for a civil war, then discussing cultural creation and stuff like that is a little bit secondary, right? I mean,
I don't know. Are we organizing online? Because I haven't seen any one of us like actually make a white community or a traditionalist community.
I'm sorry, Jolly. This is not alt-right. I think you may have mistaken the streams.
Well, that's what
if
I'm
you
worried
want-
about, white traditionalism. So I haven't
Okay,
mistaken.
but this particular community is about traditionalist cultural creation, not about forging, like, you know, a white ethno-state with blood and steel. Sorry. I mean, I don't know. I'll talk to alt-right people, but you're talking to me like, I think we're talking with sort of different goals here, I think.
Well, not as similar goals, just
Pretty similar to me, yeah.
yeah. You did say white traditionalism, so the traditionalist is the important part.
Yeah, half and half.
Well, anyway,
What was your original point, Dave? I mean, you said something like,
I mean, I don't
I
know,
don't know.
man. I mean, like, if you think that the world is going down so fast that we're in imminent direction of civil war, I mean, the direction of this community is sort of like cultural creation from Christian and traditionalist perspectives. It sort of presumes that, you know, we're not going to be like fixing bayonets to. I mean, I guess if that's the reality, but I don't know if we share goals. I guess is the problem, and so like complaining about this not being created. I mean, if the alt-right thinks that that you know it's going to be economic collapse and then civil war against communists, they should be organizing military units. I don't see them organizing military units.
well, I'm not so sure there's going to be a flat-out civil war, but there's going to be some kind of struggle. But I don't know. I mean, organizing military units, I mean, we can't really do that, right? I mean, you were saying earlier that we just don't have the money or the capability. So how many people in the alt-right across, like, the West, like, I don't know, less than 1 million maybe? Probably, well, I would put the number at like 200,000 maybe. Probably not that much. So
I don't know. I'm questioning what you're getting from us on this topic, I guess.
what do you mean? I'm just listening to you guys have a nice talk. I'm not really, you know,
Okay.
I enjoy the idea of the ideas that are going on here. I'm not really, I don't know what you mean by that. What I'm getting from
Well,
this.
I mean, so for instance, if Antifa were like, okay, how are we going to? If an Antifa person came onto the stream and was like, okay, how are we going to, like, you know, take over this country? I mean, I would just kind of be like, well, you know, I wouldn't even really know how to respond to it, right? I guess it's a little bit different because, you know, you and I probably have common opponents in the radical left, but I'm not so sure really how to respond to this particular issue.
I don't really want to take over America. I more want to take over part of it and then separate myself from it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, I think you're right in the fact that a lot of people feel very alienated from modern culture. I certainly feel alienated from modern culture.
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're saying I'm a revolutionary. I mean, I suppose I'm a revolutionary. I just don't really. I mean, all the entrenched interest aligned against us. I don't think they're going anywhere peacefully. I don't think this is a situation we can vote ourselves out of. So, I'm not endorsing violence here, but exactly what would you have me do? Just make a really funny, you know, traditionalist cartoon or something? I mean, we're not getting out of that so easily.
Well,
with the mess we got ourselves in.
I mean, the thing is that this. Well, I think that. I guess, to be honest, I see collapse coming, but I see it longer away than you do. I think that if a collapse occurs right now, we are in some pretty deep poo-poo. You know, pretty much all cultural creation and all educational purposes sort of presupposes that, you know, the next generation is going to be important to develop, and that your direction is going to influence them more than, say, like a massive war, right? So, I guess you could say that, I mean, we could say that the world might end tomorrow, and I guess you could say that it's more likely that we're going to have a big conflict. But if we have a big conflict, then you need to be buying guns, practicing with them, and forming military units. And anything that's not that is a little immaterial, right? Not to put too fine a point on it, I guess.
I mean, the reality we're dealing with is that our enemies have virtually unlimited numbers, resources, and money. I mean, if you really think that it's just going to be a repeat of the World War II situation where, the right wing just gets slaughtered, millions of us die. So
yeah, that
had
occurred to me, actually.
I'm not so sure. If it's going to come to that, what's going to happen is I'm going to the gulag. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to some kind of armed conflict, because just not enough of us on the right wing here. I think our last chance at war to win that was probably around 70 years ago.
All right,
maybe more.
So you're planning on fighting a war you're going to lose?
My idea is to make a community and separate from the country, not to try and fight a war to turn. Well, even that, I don't think that's going to work out that well. But
option, basically,
yeah, that's
pretty much.
Partition.
Separatist, just leave. Just get out of the place. Problem is, I don't think we're going to be getting out without a fight here, boys. They keep busing in, minorities in the white neighborhoods and stuff whenever they try to gentrify it.
I'm sorry, but please stop trying to inflate the alt-right with us. We're not part of the alt-right.
I think we operate in the same space, and pretending that we don't is.
Yeah, we're part of the right wing. Yes,
the alt-right is a bigger movement than I guess your Christian traditionalism. So if anything, you guys are going to need us more than we're going to need you. And I
don't think anyone needs any movement needs another to just exist. But this is off topic anyway.
Yeah, we're getting into really the weeds here.
I mean,
I'm sure I'll talk to people in the alt-right, like millennial woes and reactionary expat. I'm probably going to have them on for a stream about the alt-right after I finish my critique of the alt-right series, given I have a spare moment. Yeah, that's. I think I'll just save it for then, because I feel like I'm just sort of like, we're having this bizarre negotiation about who needs more what from whom. I mean, at this stage, we're just people on the internet that have opinions, that have desires. Some people listen to us, and I think what we're talking about now is just how to use that the most effectively, right? How to convince more people, how to red pill more people, to use a better term.
The whole idea of culture creation is that you're actually creating something. I mean, didn't you guys say this earlier? It's that you can't have a society, I guess, of just being of opposing something else.
I thoroughly believe that.
You kind of have to actually love, it's not that I hate non-whites, it's that I love whites. Okay, that's the conclusion I've been led to.
Well, to take the racial aspect out of it, I'll say this. I said the most negative thing about, I think, reactionary expat had sort of a formulation of this, and I'm going to modify it slightly. I'd say conquest second law is sort of the fundamental pessimistic thing about the right wing, which is that all institutions naturally become more left wing over time. That's the fundamental pessimistic thing about the right wing. The fundamental optimistic thing about the alt-right, about the right wing, is that everybody is conservative about the things that they love. And insofar as people love things in their society, they are conservative. And I firmly believe, as a Christian, that the things people fight for that they love will win out over the things people fight for that they hate. And in that sense, despite conquest second law, I think that in some historical sense, conservatives have a chance at bringing something good into the world, whether that is as some minority that lobbies for its own action on the margins, or whether it's from some cataclysm that's economic or civil war or otherwise. I don't know, but I kind of hold to that principle more than anything else. So, I mean, I guess that's...
That was beautiful. I love the line. Everybody is conservative about the things they love. And it's so true.
Well, is it Lord Acton who said that?
We can figure that out later.
Okay. Oh no, it's Robert Conquest's. Okay, yeah, that was the first law. I'm sorry, I just sort of So the first law is everyone is conservative about what he knows the best. But I would not say that. I would say everyone is conservative about the things that he loves, because I know a lot about the progressive movement, and I'm not conservative about the progressive movement. It is not because I don't know a lot about it; it's because I don't like it.
You know too much is the problem.
Well, I think the formulation that he made here was slightly incorrect. I think the correct formulation is that you're conservative about the things that you love, not that you're conservative about the things you know best.
And yeah, I mean, I suppose to sort of put my final 2 cents on this is that, what I keep trying to stress is the fact that, things that we, I suppose, sorry, Crocodile, but as conservative Christians, just think about what we know that we're not going to save the zombie civilization that we live in. But what elements of Western civilization do we love, and what elements of Western civilization can we salvage and preserve, so that some form of a Western project can be pursued in the future when this zombie civilization dies? And the thing is that what I think people need conservatives to try and understand is that liberalism isn't really a value of the West. It's a value of the circumstances that nations of the West at a specific period of time found themselves in, that were, quite agreeable or quite, nice to have, but they're not things that are going to last, that really we can, transport to the or salvage. And the thing is, neither is progressivism or the idea of that equality is the underlying value or liberty. I think there's things that exist beyond that are more important.
Well, I don't know. I think we sort of beaten to death like what can we do about society falling apart. So let's end in the last 15 or 20 minutes that we have with just some of the other questions I have from Patron, if I can pull them up. So Jolly Crocodile, not to jump on you, man. I think people are just getting a little bit irritated because we kept on doing this like alt-right versus not alt-right distinction, right? And that's all I wanted to say.
I'm not really in the alt-right. I mean, I don't know. You can jump on me if you'd like. The whole idea is that I wouldn't like to be a white nationalist, right? I think this is a bit absurd. I think the degree to people, how everyone is so politicized and racialized, except, usually in the opposite direction from what I am, is unhealthy, probably really unhealthy, actually. The average person shouldn't be so insane about these topics. They shouldn't really have to worry about these topics. The whole idea about me being into culture creation is that I don't want to have to worry about having a white ethno-state. I actually like to do other things, but it's just a, sad way to put it, but it's just kind of a survival mechanism, right?
Can I say one thing about the white ethno-state?
Yeah, what's going on?
This has always struck me. We have in our current constitution provisions for ethno-states. They're called the reservation system. I wouldn't, why doesn't the alt-right lobby for like Indian reservation land set asides to be given for this white ethno-state? That's like an actual achievable goal.
I mean,
we don't have any people to lobby for it, and we don't have any elected politicians.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's partially a joke, but I'm just saying, right? Like, a modification of a minor aspect of land allocation, in my book, is way better than a huge, civil war that will result in some kind of partition. That seems
I would honestly just like part of the New England area, or maybe part of the Northwestern area, to be a white reservation, I guess. I don't know, man. I
That's
mean,
prime real estate, so good luck.
well, you know, it's
Just
the
move
it's
to
the,
New
the
Hampshire.
real estate.
You're
With the,
getting part of
fit in fine
Kansas,
there.
and you'll like it.
it has the highest percentage of white people, so that's kind of my logic there.
Okay, well, not to get this conversation sidetracked on.
I don't think I said so, but I'm not really alt-right, by the way. Anyone listening?
Yeah,
I guess
we-
I tacitly
we heard
identify.
you.
We heard
No,
you.
but
We heard you. We heard you.
I have a lot of
So-
problems with it.
Oh,
Well,
yes,
moving
and I do too.
Hence the video series that will eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Well, it's been recorded forever, but I just don't have any editing time. Okay, so the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes, people asked a lot about books and movies that we thought could be recommended for people to, I think that maybe we should focus this on books more than movies. I don't know if people, I guess we can open it up. This is a question that appeared on my Patron. They wanted to know favorite books, favorite movies, why we like them, and if they had any relationship to the worldviews that we talk about on our respective YouTube channels or blogs. Does anyone want to take a whack at this?
I have a section, especially, I'm going to be doing a lot of this in the future in my channel, where I go over fictional, sometimes non-fictional, but fictional books and movies and video games that I think are pretty interesting and good for people on the right. So, I mean, I could list some things off. I don't know if we want to do that because that'd take a lot of time. But
I don't know.
I mean,
think people were just trying to look for some choice recommendations, some,
Well, there's a book. There's an interesting book that I'm curious. I want to get. It's called Father Elijah. I think it's like I guess it's an apocalyptic, not post-apocalyptic, sort of science fiction novel about a Jewish convert to Catholicism who basically is like tasked with like traveling the world by the Catholic Church, basically during a period in which the world is, modern civilization is in, absolute collapse. And it looks like a very good novel, and it's written from a Christian perspective. So,
okay. Maybe I'll just start this off. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about. I've been thinking a lot about medieval literature. If you were to ask me, I think last year when I started this channel, I think I would kind of be talking a lot about Augustine and a lot about Dante. More recently, I've kind of been thinking along the direction. I'll put it this way: I eventually, at some point, I'm going to do a video series where I go through my bookshelf and sort of map out the books that I think have really influenced me. I think that one sort of notable one that comes off is Nassim Nicholas Taleb's in the nonfiction category. Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, The Black Swan, which I highly recommend for people who want to better understand sort of original ways to think about randomness. Right now on my reading list, I think, not to do shameless plugs, but I'm going to try to take on War and Peace, which I'll begin during vacation.
when is that going to be?
I'm actually like a 20th through War and Peace, and
Oh, no way.
It is a slog. It is it's very, like, the language is very eloquent, but it's kind of difficult to get through.
I don't know. I have to say, is coming from other older books, I find Russian literature, if you've got a good translation, once you get into about over the 100th page and know the characters' names, it goes by very quickly. Right. I was able to get through War and Peace and The Brothers Karamazov. The Brothers Karamazov, I think, being what I consider to be the greatest book ever written, and certainly my favorite book. It wasn't quite as long as War and Peace, but sorry, go ahead.
I'll say something kind of quick. I mean, I could go through. I just read this Growth of the Soil book. I read Lightning in the Sun by Savitri Devi. I mean, I've been reading a lot of books throughout this year. I've read the Poetic.
Guys, look. Not so much like a laundry list, more an explanation of why. If you want me to finish the War and Peace thing.
Did you finish? Because I was going to get to what I was.
Not really, actually.
Okay, go on.
What I was going to say is people ask me. I was going to use this particular live stream as an invitation for people who wanted to read War and Peace. I was thinking maybe people could meet periodically to discuss it for 20 minutes every now and again. I have a Discord chat server if people wanted to. It's an amazing book. It will. I've read about half of it. It gets really good, really exciting. It well deserves its name. I don't know if it's as good as the Brother Karamazov, which is sort of like I think a foundational text in just Christian thought. Period. But I think War and Peace is unarguably the more influential thing. So I guess to answer Fritz's question, I'm bringing that particular book up because I wanted to make the announcement that we were going to try to read it in a group online.
Okay.
Sorry, but if people want to throw out other books that they like and explain why they like them.
Could they be nonfiction books?
Yeah, I mentioned The Black Swan. That's been incredibly influential to my life, and it's been nonfiction.
One of the things that helped me sort of fall in love with history has been the book by Christopher Clark, Iron Kingdom, which is the entire history of Prussia. And it's just the way it's written and the way it almost reads like a national epic. I'd say that's something that, like, I read it entirely over the summer and early fall of 2013, and I felt like I just felt like I was just trapped in this sort of new world of Prussia, and it felt, interestingly enough, even though it was, history, it felt like an escape, because I was learning about this culture and this nation, which is sort of comparable, I suppose, to Carthage in that it's been totally destroyed as an entity. But there was something that I felt like there was something genuinely good and, productive about that state and that culture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, definitely. I think Todd Lewis really likes Iron Kingdom as well.
The only thing I would have to say to anyone looking to read books, there are plenty of reading lists you can find basically everywhere, especially on like Poll and 4chan.
Yeah, but I think what people were asking, the patrons were asking for, well, my and our particular recommendations with particular personal. They weren't just saying like, where can I find books to? Okay, they weren't asking for where can I find a long laundry list of books. They were asking for examples of books that for us have been meaningful, and an explanation of why they've been meaningful for us, like the explanation that Fritz gave for Iron Kingdom.
Yeah, you keep cutting me off before I get to it. I was going to say, like the Poetic Edda, the Odyssey, the I don't know how to pronounce it, like the Mabinogion or something from the Celtic mythology. Basically, like the epics, I think they're called, the ancient epics, the classics. Those kind of tales are very interesting. You should probably read those. The Grimm's fairy tales. It helps you get a better understanding of.
Do you have any particular favorite ones? I mean, there's a lot.
The Odyssey. Well, the Poetic Edda isn't actually that long, but you should read that still. And the Odyssey.
How long is that?
The Poetic Edda. The one I read was around 300, 400 maybe pages. I'm not sure, but the story it's broken up into about 10 to 20 page stories. I don't know how long it depends, but the Odyssey is really good. I didn't like the Iliad, but just stories that go through like tales of grand adventure and give you an insight into the past and how these other people thought.
That's great. Any other suggestions?
That might be it.
Saving Christmas by Kirk Cameron.
Saving Christmas by Kirk.
Yep.
What's that?
The best movie ever made.
It's where Kirk Cameron saves Christmas from the damn stinking atheist scum.
Huh.
Oh my god. It sounds amazing.
Also, Lord of the Rings. You can just watch those movies all the time, like I do.
Or read the books.
Yeah, I've heard Lord of the Rings has some pretty fashy elements to it.
I insert my explicitly racist allegory into it. I know Tolkien would disapprove.
Actually, on a similar note, the favorite thing I ever read by Tolkien was his sort of Beowulf epic, Children of Húrin. I felt it almost worked better than Lord of the Rings. Although I know I'm a minority thinking that.
Well, I don't know. But what's the next question there? Didn't you have a few?
Pardon me.
What's the next question? Did you have a few? You said
Well,
questions. So.
You mean in terms of like after we're done reviewing like favorite books, movies, pieces of culture, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I don't
How
think
long have
anyone.
you been on?
We're coming up on 2. I mean, this is where I'm going to stop it. So, I mean, we're kind of winding down here.
Yeah, I don't think anyone had anything else to say. So I was asking if there were any other questions you wanted to ask.
Okay. Well, not particular. I guess we were just sort of holding it open for audience questions. I think, just to put a little bit of a feather on it, I think that, if people are looking for, it's always hard to know what people are looking for with these like recommended, what books do you recommend? And I think that might actually require a video and not just, sort of going past 5 people and asking them for their favorite books really quickly.
I have some entertainment that's not in the form of books, but there's this guy called Manly P. Hall, and you can listen to his lectures, and he goes into like occult stuff. He was a 33rd degree Mason, and he has like thousands of hours, I think, of lectures.
I'm going to de-recommend that. I think that
Mason
occultism
3.
is well, okay. Well, I don't know.
I mean,
the advice on this channel is against occultism and masonry. But if people want to disregard that, then that might be a good place to start.
I'm not saying it's real. I'm just saying it's interesting to listen to the kind of stuff that he says and goes over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I personally think there are better sources for exploring sort of mysticism. I think that there are a lot of great mystical masters among the saints, and I think that is a place to sort of start. But that's I think that's sort of the problem with this obviously it's too big of a topic. You could just spin off 7 live streams on various types of books, like religious books or novels or books about understanding various things or this thing or that. At any rate, I don't know. How about we do this? Let's just go around and people can talk about what they have planned upcoming, and then we'll close down the live stream. Thank you all for joining me.
Well, I'm actually not going to talk about what I'm doing because I found that I'm in the habit of not ever actually, whenever I seem to say I'm going to make a video on this, I never end up doing it. When I keep it spontaneous, I seem to work better. So I'm not going to say what I'm going to do.
Fair enough. I'm the opposite. I always get what I want to do done, but it always takes me twice as long as I think it will. Obviously, I have that monster on my plate about the What's Wrong with the Alt-Right series. So, Anarcha?
What exactly... well, can I ask a question, Distributus?
Sure.
What exactly is the... I asked you before, and I don't know if you responded, but I mean, what is exactly... Just sum it up quickly, like your problems with the alt-right. I'm not really...
I mean...
It'll be a multi-video series.
I sat down and recorded this. There are 8 15-minute videos in this series.
Yeah, well,
do you want to bring up your biggest problem? Because I'm like the closest guy to the alt-right, so I could just...
Well, look, I'll get that when I get... I've already told you, like, there's a problem with acceleration, there's a problem with populism, there's a problem with training new leaders, there's a problem with keeping out sociopaths, there's a problem with... there's 8 different problems that I was able to do, and it's... I know my disadvantages. I'm not... Brevity is not my talent, right? I'm sorry. I could kind of list off the laundry thing, but believe me, it's all recorded. I just need to put the pictures next to it, and that's it.
We'll be chasing you down like the mob in a few weeks. Going, where's the videos? Come on, where are they?
I always get done with my projects. It just takes me longer to do them than I usually anticipate. So I know my failings. So, sorry, Anarcho, I think we kind of interrupted you there.
So the first thing I'm going to do, starting beginning of September, is I'm going to start to get back into my anarcho read series that I've been putting off for a while. Going to try to get through Stirner, and then what I'm going to try to do starting November, I'm going to try to start a new series that's going to be weekly, and it's going to be trying to dissect certain arguments that are commonly used by progressives in arguments they get into with traditionalists and conservatives. Going to try to do that for a year, see where that goes.
Yeah, no, actually, if I could make a request for a reading series, I really, really, really want to have the collected works of Mencius Moldbug read by a non-robot onto a YouTube platform.
I was thinking of reading...
Just read it.
I was thinking of reading a few books, doing a whole read-through, but I'm not exactly sure which ones to do yet. My voice really doesn't sound that good, you know. I listen to my own videos, and I'm like, man, I wish I had Dave's voice. You know, I wish I had your voice distributed. I
wish I had Friended's voice.
Oh, sad.
I list my I have this like inability to enunciate S's. Nope. But anyway, I think everyone wishes they had different voices. I think that
if I can
most
shout out
voices are really good. What?
If I could just shout out one channel that has a really good reading voice, this
Don't
one
say
channel.
I'm doomed.
I was gonna say Marshall Ironsides. He has a whole reading series with Julius Ebola's works, Men Amongst the Ruins, and Ride the Tiger, which I recommend checking out. At one point, I'm eventually planning to post those videos on my reading channel and then respond to them, because he just has such a good voice that I'm not even going to try to top it, because I am going to eventually planning to do that series as well once I get through Stirner. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. I think Julius Evola is I think our people need to have a little bit more exposure to.
He's a good bridge between the two communities.
Pardon?
He's a good bridge between the two communities, between us and I guess Jolly and Snake.
There are a bunch of people like myself who are anti-racialists, but still are very sympathetic to reactionary ideas.
Yes.
And you know, Mencius Moldbug and you know, and some works of Julius Evola are kind of like the thing that we have in common. Like we both kind of see that there's like a lot of truth there, right? Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I guess we lost Fritz then, didn't we?
Yeah.
I can plug mine real quick if you'd like.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I skipped you over.
That's okay. I'm sure if Mouthy Buddha publishes a video that is relevant to something I've talked about, I'll make some sort of reaction to it. And I guess in terms of things I have in the works, I was considering maybe doing something a little different, more oriented on maybe like kind of a Bible study, and I would take my own direction with it. Jolly, you had something?
Oh, well, I have a few things, but I'm not sure if I should mention a couple of them here.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about, well, I was doing a series on how Jews infiltrated Sweden, for one. But I
see. Okay.
That was it's too red-pilled for this stream. No, but the other thing I'm doing is more like culture and history and stuff for Europe. I'm probably going to launch another channel or something like that later on, because being a jolly crocodile is can't really take that seriously, right? So I'll probably do like a more serious channel, and I'll keep this one for like video game playthroughs or something when I'm bored. So
excellent. Well, is that everyone? Is everyone kind of
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I'm probably going to put out like 2 or 3 reviews coming up pretty soon for books. So again, whoever was interested in books, you can go and read some of the stuff I'm reviewing.
Okay, excellent. Well, I apologize for any impoliteness on my end. I have kind of been a little bit. I promised to do this stream a really long time ago, and I kind of took it on, even though I have a lot of other real world work. So thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you patrons for donating. I know that we'll probably do these Patron streams periodically. We'll see how they go. I think that it's been productive enough, but hopefully in the future, in addition to donating money to my channel, my patrons will also give me more direction on what to talk about. So great. I'll talk to you guys later, and thank you all for participating. Have a good night, guys. Bye.